So at this moment of technological change, we do have more well-educated workforces than we've ever had in history, and people have more complex and stratified lives. They don't anchor their quotidian around a church with the way that perhaps they did 100 years ago. It's not unreasonable to expect that we have to come up with some new style of bargain that will be enabled by the technologies of the day. I mean that seems like a reasonable place to get to in 2020.
It's a totally reasonable place to get to. I fully agree. I think it's really important for me here to say tech is not evil. Tech is not necessarily good either. But it's up to us how we apply the vast powers and potentials of this technology and to what purpose. In the lab I was running, we experimented with several tools, and we have built our own actually to empower workers regardless of where they are. So it's possible. I mean, I would say almost everything is possible. What we then have to find out is, are the unions prepared? Are they ready? Are they changing their strategies? Now, the answer to that is some much faster than others. This is also a huge investment, right? A lot of unions, they don't have a data analyst on board. I think if I can draw a parallel from myself, when I engaged in the lab and had numerous meetings with tech people, experts in various fields, I have to say my mind was opened into spaces I didn't even know existed. You know, if you don't know what edge technologies are on the horizon, you don't even know what questions to ask.
Right.
So I think, that lesson for me is we need to bring these communities together. We need to bring the unions together with the technologists, together with the businesses.
Which were the edge technologies that you were exposed to that most opened your mind?
You're going to laugh now, Azeem, right? But this is me 2.5 years ago, which is a lot of time in this world. I did not know there was 14 sensors on a mobile phone, for example. Right. And I did not know that you could program something that could take over the use of these sensors and log this data, and you could log that data on your phone and then, out of magic, create lots of visualizations and lessons around, and this is the app we've actually created called WeClock, which we're going to launch very soon, does just that. I had never heard of federated databases.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that got me thinking into how could unions first structure their data, but also then via federated databases or a similar system, begin to learn from one another's data in relation to campaigning, in relation to multinationals and so on. So out of knowing what could be possible, I could then begin to ask what should be possible.
So what is the role of representing the worker interest if the union isn't active in the fields where the technologies get developed and where the technologies end up getting built?
Let me answer with a little story first. So in many of the speeches I've been giving, I usually start out by asking, so who in this room is a worker? And about maybe 50% put their hands up. Okay, I'll talk on. And then a little bit later, I would ask, how many people in this room are employed by an organization or a company? 90% would put their hands up. So then I say to all of you who are not a worker, what are you then? So why is it not sexy in the new tech world, in the startup world, or amongst, the developers and so forth? Have become manipulated to this story of we are something different than somebody else. You're an engineer, you are a doctor, you are this, and we have become told that we have a pride in our accomplishments in that way. And therefore we are different than somebody else. I am not a worker. I have risen from that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what people consciously think, but that's what we've been told to think in many ways. Since the financial crisis, a lot of people have been under extreme struggle. You can still ask, why has that not then led to a huge growth of the unions? And I think that comes to my second part of the explanation, and that is, have the unions taken themselves for given? And I know generally many of them have, great communication teams and all of this. But when I was the general secretary in the Nordic region, we asked members then, and this is in a region of the world where 80 to 90% of people are union members.
That's right.
But we asked those who weren't why they weren't. And the majority of them answered, because I've never been asked. So you can believe in your own existence so much that you actually forget to sell. And I think that has also had an explanation in relation to reaching out into these new industries, these new businesses. So the two of them, you're not a worker, I don't identify as a worker, and then the lack of re-identification.
We are starting to see some efforts for collectivization and collective organization in this new economy. I think, very famously, you have the sort of Uber drivers and gig workers who coordinate on WhatsApp groups and Signal groups to share their experiences and perhaps use that to sort of better manage their work. Yeah. And we've seen a lot of worker rebellions happening in the big five. In Amazon in particular, we just had Tim Bray, who's a senior vice president, resign and whistleblow. And of course, we had the Google walkout. In fact, we had Meredith Whittaker as a guest on this podcast, where I think something like 10% of Google employees self-organized using digital tools, actually some of them provided by Google themselves, to start to apply pressure on the company. Is that that idea of a sort of bottoms-up self-organization using the tools that are available, is that a viable successor to the traditional notion of a union with a sort of shop steward and union dues being paid?
Even the well-established unions started like that. They started from the bottom up. They started because a group of workers, decided, hey, is this reasonable? And they got together and they collectivized. And I'm quite sure that the uprisings we see, which I personally welcome, for me, this is solidarity in the making, right? They will at some point also reach a stage of maturity where they will need, more institutionalized setups and collaboration with others. So I think it's great. This is like a seedling that is now growing out of the soil. It shows that, if you take the Google workers, the Amazon workers, that they have had the capital to unionize around some very important themes. They were smart to use their technologies. They have also been brave.